Thanks for being here.
Hey, Martha and Brett, how are you?
I'm doing well. So let me ask you, where do you think things stand? There's a lot of talk, a lot of concern among Republicans that the turnout's not going to be as high, in part because they're just angry in certain quarters of the state about how November 3rd turned out.
Brett, we're about where we were in November. I won that race by 2 points. The Libertarian got 2. So in Georgia, 52.5% rejected Jon Ossoff, my opponent, and this Democratic liberal offering that they were espousing during the presidential election. So tomorrow is not unlike what we saw in November. If we have a strong Republican turnout, we will win again. And that's what the president is coming tonight for, is to basically just convince the base out here and the people who have not voted yet in this runoff. The some 2.5 million people voted for him in November and voted for me in November. And in this race, we have about 2 million people yet to vote who voted in November. So that's what the call out is for tonight.
You heard Peter Doocy reference Jon Ossoff, and I went to this rally in Conyers today, listened to his stump speech, which now includes something about President Trump's call with the Secretary of State of Georgia, saying that Georgia voters need to stand up and say their vote can be counted. Have you listened to that entire call, and what's your take on it?
Look, I think the president was having a conversation about a negotiation. First of all, I think it's very unprofessional that a statewide elected official would secretly tape that and leak it. But that notwithstanding, what the president did in that phone call is exactly what he's been doing the last 8 weeks, what I've been asking for as well, and that is a fair and transparent accounting of what happened in November. There are supposed irregularities that are of such magnitude that give us pause about what happened in November. But on the eve of the election day in January 5th, what we're trying to do right now is focus people on tomorrow. We've hired 8,000 poll watchers, more than anybody's ever done. We have the notorious drop boxes under surveillance. So we are doing what we can. I'm not a federal officer. I have no say inside state affairs. But we've been asking for a General Assembly special session. We've asked the Secretary of State for some investigation. We went to court. And so now it's all about getting out tomorrow. And I want people to vote tomorrow with confidence that if we won in November with any supposed irregularities in, if we vote tomorrow, we'll win again.
You've called for Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to resign. The Secretary of State's office went through point by point what they said was on that call as far as the irregularities today. But Raffensperger, talking to Martha earlier this afternoon, said this about your call for him to resign.
Senator Perdue still owes my wife an apology for all the death threats she got after he asked for my resignation. And I've not heard one peep from that man since. And he wants to call me face-to-face, man-to-man. I'll talk to him off the record. But he hasn't done that.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's outrageous that anybody made a death threat, but that had nothing to do with my call for his resignation. That had to do with total incompetence around what happened in November. Look, we had a Secretary of State that acquiesced to Democratic demands. We entered into a consent decree without any lawsuit. There was no real fight, and we changed things. Historically, only 5% of our election in Georgia were made by absentee ballots. In this election in November, it was 30%. The probability of having the low number that we had rejected because of signature variances was the probability that we could have that low number was only 1 in 10,000. That has not been addressed. Nobody's looked at that. And this is what we're asking for. It's one reason why I'm very concerned that we, after this election, get at changing some of the rules in Georgia. In the meantime, I'm called to hold this seat. This is the last line of defense against this radical socialist agenda. You heard Joe Biden just today say that this is a generational election. What does he mean by that? Well, it's exactly what Chuck Schumer said. Take Georgia and change America. AOC said, no, we want to win those 2 seats because we do not want to negotiate. They want the Green New Deal, Brett, without compromise.
You know, you've spent some time charging that your opponent is tied to China. When asked about that directly, he explains it briefly and then turns the China question to you. Here's what he told Peter Doocy.
These investigations have been aired by dozens of television channels in dozens of countries all over the world. And one of those television channels was in Hong Kong. Senator David Perdue bragged under oath about how he spent most of his career outsourcing American jobs to China. He operated factories in Shenzhen province in China in cooperation with the Chinese Communist Party, and he should explain that on the record.
Your chance, Senator.
We did exactly that in 2014, and we were elected by 8 points. We did it again in this election. We were elected by 2. We just missed this runoff by a few thousand votes. This accusation is made by a young man that's never created one job in his life. I've created tens of thousands of American jobs in my career. What he did is he hid his involvement with the Communist Chinese Party. He worked for them for 2 years. He lied about it to the people of Georgia. He got caught, lied about it again, and he still hasn't answered Peter's question. He accused Peter of being a serious journalist. He should know better than ask a question, but Peter was just doing his job. And Jon Ossoff and the Democratic Party has not answered. This is a burgeoning scandal that Jon Ossoff has, just like Eric Swalwell and Hunter Biden. And the Democrats have absolutely done everything they can to avoid even talking about that. That's why Jon Ossoff goes on the attack with these false claims that you just heard.
Well, Senator, we appreciate your time, and we'll be covering every moment of this tomorrow, Election Day.
Thanks, guys.